Nyalche Chembur Toto Ningmi Shang, Donen Manam Chembur, Nyalche Lankara Dargan Santo, Shermar, Tumba Tuche Chanla Ki Shom Sar, Nishan Roar Zer Nishan Kamsa, Jabur Tuji Shan, Yelaman, Jimmy Panzo Jala, Soran. Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo.
Profound and subtle dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Now we'll discuss the Shurangama Sutra. As for the Shurangama Sutra, it should be a Buddhist scripture of the second and third turnings of the Dharma wheel. It mainly emphasizes the teachings of the second turning of the Dharma wheel. Previously, in the content of the first turning of the Dharma wheel, the 5 aggregates, 6 sense doors, 12 sense sources, and 18 constituents are all considered to exist. In texts like the Abhidharma Kosha and Abhidharma, they would never say these are empty or that they don't exist. They wouldn't teach this way. But when we reach this point, it first explains their essential nature, then explains that such appearances are not established in ultimate reality. We need to understand this principle clearly. We have already discussed the 10 sense sources previously, namely the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, along with their corresponding objects. We've covered them all pair by pair. Today we'll discuss the final pair among the 12 sense sources, which is the mind source. Whether it's the mind source among the 12 sense sources or the Dharma source, this principle compared to the previous 10 sources is slightly more difficult, though not particularly so, because with the previous ones, as we all know, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body are called material faculties. In the Abhidharma Kosha, these are faculties with material form. Their objects are also fixed in nature. Form, sound, smell, taste, and touch are also fixed, and they have material form. According to the Sarvastivada school's view, they all have substantial existence. Form, sound, smell, taste, and touch all have substantial existence. So they are truly dust-like objects. As for the Dharma source, its perceiving subject is the mental consciousness. We've discussed before that it is the mind faculty. Its object is called Dharma dust. This Dharma dust doesn't have a real substantial nature like form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. It lacks substantial essence. But it appears as images that depend on the mind faculty. These images also have real existence, including good and evil. These are all objects of our mental consciousness. So this is called Dharma dust. Today we come to discuss the final 2 sources among the 12 sense sources. The Buddha told Ananda, in your mind, you constantly perceive objects of the 3 natures, wholesome, unwholesome, and neutral, giving rise to Dharma patterns. Here it says that for this final pair, the Buddha tells Ananda, you constantly in your mind faculty or in your mental consciousness, what arises and what you perceive. Your mental consciousness has 3 types of objects, wholesome objects, unwholesome objects, and neutral objects. These 3 types of objects that arise depending on mental consciousness. What are these actually called? What do they give rise to? Dharma dust or Dharma patterns? In Tibetan, this is translated as the true nature of dharmas. We can call them dharma characteristics or dharma dust. All objects of mental consciousness are dharmas. What kind of dharmas? Here we speak of wholesome dharmas, unwholesome dharmas, and neutral dharmas. These dharmas still exist. This dharma doesn't mean the Buddha's teachings. It's a type of dharma dust that is the object of our mental consciousness. In this way, just as the objects of the eye faculty are material forms, wholesome dharmas actually exist, unwholesome dharmas also exist, and neutral dharmas also exist. So here we have what are called 3 types of dharma patterns or 3 types of dharma dust. Everyone knows this. I was thinking of looking up the Gateway to Knowledge just now, but there wasn't enough time. What does Gateway to Knowledge say about dharma dust? What does the Abhidharma Kosha refer to as dharma dust? What are the dharmas before the mind faculty? Do you remember? Are they also wholesome, unwholesome, and neutral dharmas? When teaching the Shurangama Sutra, I've been teaching the Abhidharmakosha for nearly 20 years now. Originally, I wasn't particularly, I only studied it myself and listened to it once or twice. So I'm not very proficient, not like with Madhyamaka. I'm somewhat more familiar with Madhyamaka and Dzogchen, I suppose. So what does this dharma, what does gateway to knowledge say about it? The dharma realm, right? What does it refer to? What are the dharmas that are objects of mental consciousness? Are they also wholesome, unwholesome, and neutral? Conditioned and unconditioned dharmas. Is space also dharma dust? Space is also included. Analytical cessation and non-analytical cessation. Are these conditioned and unconditioned dharmas? Wow, your study of the Abhidharmakosha has been quite unsuccessful. 20 years ago, I was definitely, none of those are currently studying the Abhidharmakosha are here today, right? All right, then we'll look at it later. That form, conditioned and unconditioned dharmas are all objects of mental consciousness, as are unconditioned dharmas. In that case, the color of a pillar would also belong to unconditioned dharmas, and sound would be among conditioned dharmas. All right, let's take another look. Now, are these dharmas, the text continues, these dharmas of the three natures. Now, are these dharmas produced by the mind itself, or do they exist apart from the mind in some other location? Now the questioning begins. Since these dharmas are as described, are these dharma das actually produced by your mind, or apart from mind, is there some other location where they are produced? Either didn't we just discuss these three dharmas of wholesome, unwholesome, and neutral? Are they produced by mind, or are they produced by some other place apart from mind? This is the question. Ananda, if they arise from mind itself, then dharmas would not be dust. If you say that these dharma dusts, these wholesome, unwholesome, and neutral dharmas we just discussed, if they are produced by your own mind, then dharmas would not be dust. Because they are produced by mind, what you call dharma realm or dharma dust would not be external objective dust. If it's produced by mind, mind is certainly not an external object. In that case, what we call dharma realm or dharma dust would not be dust, not be an object. They would not be objects of mental perception. How then could they constitute a sense source? They would not be objects of mental perception. If these dharmas are produced by mind, then they must be of the nature of mind. They are mind. In that case, they are not objects of mental perception. Originally, dharmas are, for instance, sound is the object of the ear faculty. Dharmas are the objects of mind, of mental consciousness. But if they are produced by mind, then they are not objects. Since they are not objects of mental perception. They are not objects of your mental consciousness or mind faculty. How then could they constitute a sense source? In this way, how could they become dharma dust, objects of mental consciousness? How could they be dharma sources or dharma dust? How could this happen? This is the first aspect of the problem. Many of us might think that the dharmas that are objects of mental consciousness surely exist, because among form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and dharmas, these dharmas as objects surely exist. But if these dharmas are truly produced by mind, there would be this fault. We couldn't accept it. Now, for the second aspect of doubt, if they exist apart from mind in some other location, if you think that apart from mind, dharma dust exists in some other place, then in that case, then the intrinsic nature of dharmas, are they knowing or non-knowing? Then problems arise. The intrinsic nature of dharmas is not apart from mind, as we currently accept. Dharma dust exists in some other place. If it exists in some other place, then fine. The intrinsic nature of your dharmas must have been established. If the intrinsic nature of dharmas is established, then let me test and ask you, does the intrinsic nature of your dharmas have awareness or lack awareness? Are they knowing or non-knowing? Since we accept that dharma dust exists elsewhere, in that case, does your dharma dust have awareness
awareness or lack awareness? This is the question. If the first question is answered saying that if it knows, then it is mind. If different from you, it is not dust. It would be like another's mental activity. If you say that the Dharma dust existing elsewhere still has awareness, if it has awareness, then what has awareness is mind. It is the mind faculty. It is mental consciousness. In that case, different from your type of consciousness, there exists a kind of non-dust Dharma. Not objective dust, and it has awareness. If it has awareness, it's also different from your awareness because it is, after all, an object. And such a thing, apart from your mental consciousness, there exists another non-dust, non-dharma dust something. In that case, it would be like another's mental activity. This would be equivalent to someone else's mental continuum. Your dharma would become exactly like another person's mental continuum. If it is you, then it is mind. How could your mind become dual to you? If this is the case, if it is you, then it is mind. Your mind is your mental consciousness. In that case, your object we just mentioned is also another kind of mind. Then how could your mind become another mind? Because you also said that your object exists as something else, and it has awareness, has consciousness. If it has consciousness, then it becomes another mental continuum. If it's another mental continuum, then your mind is your mind. It couldn't become his. In that case, how could you have your mind and another mind different from you? Originally, we had it very simple. My mind is the perceiving subject, and the other, whether it's conditioned dharmas, wholesome dharmas, unwholesome dharmas, or neutral dharmas, these are dharma dust. But I initially said that this dharma dust exists elsewhere, and it has awareness. If it has awareness, then your mind is one mind, and the dharma dust that is your mind's object becomes another mind. This way, it still has a certain relationship with you. The relationship between you and dharma dust ends up becoming two minds. In that case, it's certainly unreasonable. No one in this world would accept this. For instance, the wholesome dharma I perceive, for example, the conceptual thoughts of my mind visualizing a Buddha image, if this Buddha image had another mind, then one person would become two minds. This would certainly be unreasonable. This completes the refutation of the first sub-question within the first main question. Now for the second sub-question within the first main question, if they are non-knowing, we just said that dharma dust exists apart from mind and lacks awareness. This is the second question. Didn't we just say, are they knowing or non-knowing? If you accept they are non-knowing, that dharma dust just mentioned lacks awareness, then in that case, this dust is neither form, sound, smell, taste, separation, contact, cold, warmth, nor the characteristics of space. Where then could it be? It says, if you say this dharma dust lacks awareness, then lacking awareness, your dust is certainly not form, because form is the object of the eye. It's not sound, the object of the ear faculty, nor smell and taste, objects of the nose and tongue faculties, and separation, contact, cold and warmth. Separation, contact, cold and warmth are the tactile objects of our body, meaning it's not the tactile sensations of separation, contact, cold and warmth. This non, I don't know about the punctuation. Actually, this non might apply to everything. Perhaps commas would be better here. Form, sound, smell, taste, then separation, contact, cold, warmth refer to touch. Because within touch there are cold, warmth, and separation, contact. All these are within the category of tactile sensation, within the realm of touch. Separation, contact, cold, warmth are tactile, and nor the characteristics of space, because if it lacks awareness, it should be these things: form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and including space. All our objects are form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and space. Apart from these, there are no others. In the world, there are no other dharmas apart from form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and space. So if you say there exists a non-aware dharma, then apart from form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and space, there are none in that case. Where exactly is your dharma dust? Where could it be? Apart from form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and space, where exactly are the objects of mental consciousness? Where exactly are they? Now, from form to space, there is no indication anywhere. It should not be that in the human realm there exists something beyond space. Here it says, when we analyze in this way, between form and space, the form, sound, smell, taste, touch we just mentioned, and finally space, between form and space. Your so-called dharma dust cannot be indicated anywhere. You can't point out, this is square, this is round, or this is beautiful, or this sounds good, or this is such and such. All things from form to space, none can indicate it. In that case, in the entire human world, there should not exist another dharma dust apart from material forms and space, a third category of object. This is impossible. In our human world, form, sound, smell, taste, touch, dharmas, and space. These should be very comprehensive concepts. But when we analyze dharma dust from form to space, we actually cannot find it. If we cannot find it in this human world, apart from the range between form and space, is there another dharma dust you can point out? It's very difficult to point out. So through this method of analysis, indeed, just like the previous ones, eye-seeing also cannot be obtained, ear-hearing also cannot be obtained, nose-smelling also cannot be obtained, tongue-tasting also cannot be obtained, and body-feeling also cannot be obtained. Similarly, our current dharma, mind-sensing or mind-knowing, the dharmas known by mental consciousness, also cannot possibly be obtained. In this way, analyzing emptiness is actually, in one sense, indeed quite simple. I noticed that Vairotsana, it seems, composed a commentary on the Heart Sutra from a tantric perspective, very concise. In it, he also analyzes in this way. Don't we analyze by saying, no eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body? When we consistently analyze in this way, emptiness actually becomes very easy to understand. In our conventional appearances, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body do indeed exist. But in reality, they are all unobtainable. In this way, it says here that in the entire human world, apart from form to space, where is this dharma? It's not within this range, nor is it outside of it. Therefore, mind is not an object of perception. By whom then is the sense source established? So mind, isn't it that mind doesn't have some other object of perception apart from itself? Apart from mind, there's another kind of object, but this is not an object of mental perception. Mind is not an object. If it's not an object of mental perception, how can this dharma source be established? Who will establish this dharma source? Actually, without depending on mind, there's no way to establish it. Apart from mind, dharma dust also cannot be established. Below, the summary begins. Therefore, you should know that dharma patterns and mind both lack any location. So we should understand that dharma dust, the objects of mind, and our mind, or the mind faculty, these two are without any substantial location. The essence of dharma dust is not established, and the essence of the mind faculty was analyzed before. It's also not established. In this way, then both mind and dharmas are illusory. Fundamentally, they are neither conditioned nor of spontaneous nature. So mind and dharmas, the mind faculty and dharma dust, both of these exist conventionally but don't exist ultimately. Just as the Diamond Sutra teaches, if mind has abiding, then it is non-abiding. If mind has abiding, it's actually also non-abiding. Abiding is non-abiding. Existence and non-existence are the same. What exists conventionally actually doesn't exist. The meaning of existence is also the meaning of non-existence. The meaning of non-existence is also the meaning of existence. It seems contradictory, but actually it's not contradictory. In Mipham Rinpoche's Beacon of Certainty, it also says that appearance and emptiness are non-dual and indivisible. They seem to be contradictory, but actually they are not contradictory. The reason is also like this. Therefore, dharmas and mind, the dharma realm, here we're talking about sources, the dharma source and mind source, are fundamentally neither conditioned nor of spontaneous nature. They are neither conditioned nor non-conditioned, neither natural nor non-natural. They are truly the wondrous power of the Tathagata Garbha, or the manifestation of wondrous true suchness. Their true essence, when examined, is unobtainable, yet when unexamined it's vividly clear. If we consider some of the direct pointing out instructions in Tantra, we might think in this moment. Whatever arises in your mind right now, as also found in some empowerment rituals of the masters, whether what arises in your mind is unwholesome thoughts or wholesome thoughts, all of these are like dense white clouds and dark clouds in space. When we look in the present moment, actually this good and evil dissolves into its own nature, just like clouds dissolving into the Dharmadhatu space. Using this kind of analogy, we also recognize that before our mental consciousness, on one hand, images of form, sound, smell, taste, and touch can also appear. This sound is pleasant, this is delicious, not delicious. Next, we discuss, moreover, Ananda, how are the 18 constituents fundamentally the wondrous true suchness of the Tathagata Garbha? Below we begin discussing the 18 constituents. They are also the wondrous true suchness of the Tathagata Garbha. Why do we say that all 18 constituents are the wondrous true suchness of the Tathagata Garbha? These constituents, actually everyone knows the 6 faculties, 6 dusts, and 6 consciousnesses are all called constituents. The 6 faculty constituents, 6 dust constituents, and 6 consciousness constituents. In the Abhidharma Kosha, constituent seems to have the meaning of seed. In Sanskrit, it also has the meaning of seed. When some great masters from the Han region explain it, it also has the meaning of boundary, realm, limitation. It's a category with certain boundaries. For example, the desire realm, beings with desires exist in one realm. Then the form realm, a realm with luminous forms. The formless realm, a realm without forms. Constituent also has this meaning. Also, don't we study the Uttara Tantra? The Uttara Tantra constantly discusses constituent throughout. When discussing this constituent, for example, stone has the constituent of stone, gold has the constituent of gold, silver has the constituent of silver. It has a kind of constituent nature. This constituent seems to have quite rich content. It has the meaning of boundary, it has the meaning of seed, and it has constituent nature, its own fixed essence. Just as every sentient being has Buddha nature is a kind of constituent nature. When studying the Uttara Tantra, constituent is also very important. This should be clear. So what exactly are these constituents like? Actually, there are 18 constituents, but among the 18 constituents, here the main focus is on the 6 consciousnesses, because if the 6 consciousnesses can be refuted, then the faculties and objects become easy to refute. For example, there's a very important wall in the middle, and the walls on both sides depend on the middle wall. If the middle wall falls down, the walls on both sides have nothing to depend on. So here, on the surface, it seems to discuss 18 constituents, but actually the 6 consciousnesses, from I consciousness to mental consciousness, are the main focus of refutation. If they are refuted, then dust and faculties will naturally be refuted along with them. Everyone should understand this approach. So the Buddha tells Ananda, Ananda, as you understand it, the I and visible forms are conditions for the arising of I consciousness. The Buddha tells Ananda, you see, Ananda keeps silent, maybe he doesn't quite understand, but I see that later he becomes more active. He lets the Buddha speak while he just eats sunflower seeds and doesn't say anything. The Buddha says, Ananda, you should understand that your I and form serve as conditions, and then I consciousness arises, right? Because the I is a faculty and form is an object, depending on these 2 conditions, I consciousness can arise. Ananda would certainly agree with this. It's correct. Then the Buddha asks him, does this consciousness arise from the I faculty with the I as its boundary? Or does it arise from visible forms, with forms as its boundary? He asks, does your I consciousness depend on the I faculty to arise and then become the I constituent? If it depends on the I faculty to arise, it would certainly become the I constituent if it arises from the I faculty. Generally, for example, with mixed-race children, if they arise depending on a Western father, then they would have Western bloodline. If they depend on an Eastern mother, they would also have Eastern bloodline from her conditions. So does your I consciousness arise from the I and become the I constituent, or arise from forms and become the form constituent, having the constituent nature of form? Is it like this? Ananda still doesn't speak, so the Buddha says, Ananda, you should say something. Don't be like this. Have you been a bit unhappy these past few days, or what's wrong? If you won't speak, then I'll continue with the refutation. If it arises from the I, then without forms and space, there would be nothing to distinguish. If, Ananda, you won't speak, I'll begin analyzing. Analyzing what? If you think that I consciousness, the consciousness of the I, arises depending on the I faculty, then there would be no forms or space. Because it arises depending on the I faculty, I consciousness is a type of conscious state. If it merely depends on the I faculty to arise, then there would be no forms, no space, because forms are external objects and space is also external. In that case, both forms and space would be absent. If forms and space are absent, there would be nothing to distinguish. If there are no forms and space, then these external objects are forms and space and so forth. White, red, blue, or this is a mountain. All the various things the eye sees. This is green, this is a television, this is a flower, this is a vase, all these phenomena. In that case, there would be no way to distinguish any of them, because it arises depending on the I faculty, and the I faculty cannot possibly have these things upon it, so it would be impossible to distinguish them, because it doesn't depend on forms or space. It all arises depending on the I faculty alone. Then toward the entire world, you'd be in a blur, unable to distinguish anything. Even if you have this consciousness, what use would it be? Although you have this I consciousness, you have consciousness, but because your consciousness arises depending on the faculty, in that case, no matter what you might think, this consciousness would be of no use to you whatsoever, because I consciousness has already arisen depending on the faculty. Once I consciousness has arisen, then whether you have I consciousness or mental consciousness, what use would it be? No use. It would be redundant. Your vision is neither blue, yellow, red, nor white. There is nothing to indicate it. How then could a constituent be established? If this is the case, if it arises depending on the I faculty, then your vision shouldn't have blue, yellow, red, or white colors, and it also shouldn't have square, triangular, up and down, and so forth. It shouldn't have various indications, because everything arises depending solely on the I faculty. Does the I faculty have any blue, red, white, or blue colors? It's impossible. In that case, the I faculty has nothing at all. So how could a constituent of I consciousness be established? How could the constituent of your I consciousness be established? If everything arises depending solely on the I faculty, indeed all the rich variety of the world, or all these varied phenomena would all become, for you, reduced to nothing. Everything would be gone. There should be this fault. So we tell Ananda, your I consciousness arising depending on the I faculty won't work. Won't. Then continuing with the second question, does I consciousness, this is the second question, arise depending on forms to produce the I constituent? This is also unreasonable. How is it unreasonable? If it arises from forms, then when space is without forms, your consciousness should cease. If you say that I consciousness depends on external pillars, vases, and other material forms to arise, this I consciousness arises depending on material forms. In that case, when you face empty space with nothing there, when space is without forms, space has no material form, at this time your consciousness should cease. This means that your I consciousness entirely depends on forms to arise. In that case, like our previous reasoning, you would never have the opportunity to see space before you. In that case, from now on, you would never again see the empty space in front of you. You would never see it. Apart from material forms in front of you, there should be nothing else. How then could consciousness know this to be the nature of space? In that case, how could you say, oh, I already know the nature of space. There's nothing in front. It's the nature of space. Such statements shouldn't be possible, but actually you still do have them, don't you? We say this space today is, when you see there's nothing in the middle, we still call this seeing space, just like when there's no light, we speak of seeing darkness. It's the same kind of statement. If forms change, you would also know that the characteristics of forms have changed. If your consciousness doesn't change, how could a constituent be established? This is a bit difficult to understand. If you say, didn't we just say before that I consciousness depends on forms to arise? If it depends on forms to arise, there's the fault of not seeing space. That was before. If you say that you first see forms and later see space, then you've already changed along with forms when forms change. Forms could have two interpretations. One is forms. For example, what I see in front are forms, some red, some blue, then later white, black. As forms change like this, you also know that the characteristics of forms have changed. Although the forms in front of you keep changing, your grasping at their characteristics will also change. But actually your consciousness cannot change. Why can't it change? Because we said before that your I consciousness arises from forms, not from consciousness. It arises from external forms, not from your own I consciousness. In that case, your consciousness cannot change. If your consciousness cannot change, then from where does the I constituent arise? Where is the constituent of I consciousness established? It cannot be established. Here also, through debate, such a consequence is pointed out to him. If it changes with change, then the constituent's characteristics are naturally absent. If you say that your consciousness changes along with the changes in external forms, then in that case, the constituent of your I consciousness should not have its own characteristics. Why? Because you just said it arises through forms. If it arises through forms, then with consciousness changing according to forms or forms changing according to consciousness, then your I constituent should not exist. Why doesn't it exist? Because the inherent characteristics of your I constituent cannot be established. If there's change, then your inherent characteristics cannot be established. Because your consciousness shouldn't change according to objects, it arises from an independent material form. There's no mention of involving your mental consciousness. If your mental consciousness were involved, then I consciousness, according to your view, would have ceased to exist long ago. If unchanging, then permanent. If you say that although external forms change, my I consciousness always remains unchanged, if consciousness always remains unchanged, then since it arises from forms, it should not know where space is located. In that case, although you admit that because it doesn't change, if it doesn't change, then although I consciousness arises from forms, it should never know about space. Because it doesn't change. If it doesn't change, my I consciousness earlier arose from material forms. If it arose from material forms, it's always within material forms. And within material forms means, for example, within the material form of a vase. If I consciousness arises, then I would always see vases and shouldn't see space or any other phenomena. There would still be this kind of fault. Below, because the above two approaches, one is arising from the I, which is also unreasonable, and arising from forms, this I consciousness is also unreasonable. In that case, below there's another viewpoint. My I consciousness arises from depending on both forms and the I faculty, arising from these two dharmas. Many of us also think this way because I consciousness requires an objective condition of external objects and the dominant condition of the faculty. When these two conditions are complete, it can arise. But if we examine this statement in detail, it's also unreasonable. How is it unreasonable? If combining both types, I and forms arising together, if unified, there's separation within. If separate, there's combination of the two. The essential nature becomes chaotic. How could a constituent be formed? It says, if at the same time these two, that is, the I faculty and material forms, arise together, many of us might indeed think this way. Without the I faculty won't work. Without material forms also won't work. With these two conditions, they can arise together. In that case, there are still faults. What faults are there? If unified, there's separation within. If separate, there's combination of the two. The essential nature becomes chaotic. This seems to be analyzed as follows. The I faculty and material forms, these two dharmas produce I consciousness. In producing I consciousness, does I consciousness arise by combining with these two dharmas or by not combining? If you say it arises by combining, then if unified there's separation within. How is if unified there's separation within? My I consciousness depends on, for example, this is one dharma, this counts as an object, and this is the I faculty. So these two, my I consciousness arises on top of these. They both give rise to it. If they both give rise to it, does my I consciousness combine with both of them? If it combines, combining with one on this side and one on that side, there's combination on both sides. If there's combination on both sides, then this side is the dust portion, the material form portion, and this side is the I faculty portion, the root portion. So my I consciousness combines with both of these. Let me see what's on here. For example, let's say this mask is I consciousness. This doesn't look quite right. Let's use a fist instead. In that case, my I faculty has become two dharmas, a portion related to the faculty and a portion related to dust. In that case, if they combine, in the middle so the faculty portion and the dust portion have separation between them, have isolation. In this case, it seems that Chang Shui Zixuan and Master Wu Yi both say that the faculty is the portion with awareness, while dust lacks awareness. So one has awareness, one lacks awareness. They're completely incompatible, they say. But actually, according to the Hinayana view, faculties are also non-sentient dharmas. They lack awareness. Dusts also lack awareness. Then this consciousness, whether it combines with them or not, there should be separation in the middle. Perhaps explaining it this way would be better. But several commentaries all consider that if mental consciousness combines with these two, then one is the portion with awareness and one is the portion without awareness. Perhaps if they belong to a person's continuum, it might work. If they belong to a person's continuum, then faculties can gradually produce awareness. Actually, regarding the faculty's own essence, the Abhidharmakosha says they are a type of material dharma, but they are non-sentient dharmas. It should be like this. Faculties shouldn't be conditioned formations, should they? In that case, if they combine, there's separation in the middle. If they're separate, if these two are separate, these two have the opportunity to combine. If they combine, then their essential nature becomes chaotic. Why does the essential nature become chaotic? Because one is the dust constituent, one is the faculty constituent. So finally, this I consciousness, does it have the constituent nature of external objects or the constituent nature of faculties? Or is it a mixture of these two as one entity? Or with the two, there's still another kind of separation in the middle? So this kind of I consciousness is because dust is an external dharma. If faculties are internal, then the result of this internal-external mixture, in that case, perhaps this I consciousness is also not. I consciousness is actually a type of consciousness. It has neither faculty particles nor external object particles, so ultimately it also cannot be established. This method of explanation, everyone should understand it this way. Therefore, you should know that I and forms as conditions producing the I consciousness constituent, all three locations are non-existent. Here it mentions three locations. Therefore, we should understand that I and forms as conditions producing I consciousness. Actually, all three locations are non-existent from the perspective of the I faculty, because when he refuted just now, it was mainly focused on I consciousness, directly refuting I consciousness and indirectly refuting the I faculty and external visual objects. These two were also directly refuted. So the I consciousness constituent produced by I and forms as conditions, actually all three locations cannot be established. It's exactly the same as the son of a barren woman and turtle hair or rabbit horns, completely identical. Then I and forms and the form constituent, the three, is it consciousness or form constituent? I and forms, the latter should be consciousness, right? Consciousness constituent or form constituent. Form constituent, the three, isn't this the same as before? Fundamentally neither conditioned nor of spontaneous nature. It doesn't have this. It doesn't say they are conventionally non-existent, and it doesn't say the three are illusory. It's different from before. I don't know how the Tibetan text puts it just now. Logically speaking, I and forms and the consciousness constituent, that is I consciousness, these three are fundamentally neither conditioned nor of spontaneous nature, but are the wondrous power and true nature of the luminous Tathagata Garbha. Let's stop here for now, all right?
Kirgana jirano chukai chupun tsunen droa droa sho
bandangara badma asadarda bandangara badma asada bandangara badma asadarda